I want to talk to successful people and learn about the adversity they went through, how they got through it, what we can learn from it, and help us all collectively move forward. Underdogs don't stop. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Underdog Untold, a show about underdogs. Why underdogs? Underdogs are usually bet against, they're usually underrated, but the best thing about them is they have untapped potential. And usually, when adversity hits, our best selves come up. And so today, it's an honor to introduce Lynn Smith, who, if you really think about her career, and I'm about to tell you what she's done, 15 years as a media expert, worked for NBC, CNN, CNBC, The Today Show. I mean, you name it, for 15 years. So you can imagine the adversity she's gone through. But from the outside, she looks like a successful woman. She has a beautiful family, and I'm excited to introduce her. Lynn, thank you so
Uh,
much for being here today.
Navin, it's so great to be with you. I do always laugh when people go through sort of the logos, right? You're right. It does. It sounds like it's been easy. It's successful, but this is why I love that you're doing this show. We never talk about the adversity. We never talk about the massive failures, and for me, there have been lots of them.
Yeah, and actually, when we were talking, and I've known Lynn for a couple of years, we were talking recently about one of my favorite things when someone tells you you can't do it or you will not be able to. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a news director that told you you were never going to make it?
Yes, actually, before I even got my first job as a reporter, I started as a producer at the Today Show, and I went to a local station to get some experience on camera, which if you've ever done anything on camera for the first time, it's not going to be good. It's impossible. It's a total different skill set. Naveen, it's like me saying I could go in and perform surgery without going to medical school. It's a skill set.
Yeah.
And this news director put me on a teleprompter, which is even harder than just being on camera. And he looked at me and he's like, "You're never going to make it. You're never going to make it to a top 10 market in at least 10 years. I just want you to understand that and have an expectation of that." And I was 24 at the time, 25, and had a good cry, had a nice little good cry. And then I had a mindset shift, and I continued to have this mindset shift as I got more and more experience. So it was early on that I had to think about this. But I can't wait to prove you wrong. That was the mindset shift of, instead of when somebody told me I couldn't do something, it was, I can't wait to prove you wrong. And there was a moment 2 years later that that same news director crossed paths with me at WNBC, which was the number one market in, in the country where I was a reporter. And he looked at me and we just sort of smiled. And he's like, "Wow, okay, I was wrong."
Oh, wow.
And it was just one of those moments where, and I think it's a reminder to everyone, when someone tells you no, rather than listening to it, think of it as, I can't wait to show you yes.
That's incredible. And I talk about the mindset shift, and I think as we get more experience, get older, we realize
Mhm.
how powerful it is and how much more control we have. But let's go back to your 24-year-old self. You just got told that. You were crying, you were upset. I mean, were you thinking about, while you were crying, I got this, it's not going to happen? Or is this over time? Because I feel like sometimes when I speak about things, oh, I'm going to do this, it didn't happen right away. It felt really low and dark at that time. And so, can you explain or try to remember that process of when you were that 24-year-old who just heard it?
Yeah. I think that it was something that was instilled at me in a very young age, especially by my father, because I watched his career. And my dad, I've talked about this story a good bit because it shaped me tremendously, but he's an immigrant. And so he went through school, and, he wasn't the best at English, obviously,
Mhm.
got better and better. But when he graduated, his college or his high school counselor told him he wasn't smart enough to go to college. So he should just become a carpenter like his father. And he didn't listen, because that's something that, obviously, if somebody tells you you're not smart enough, in an educational setting, you could listen to it. And he didn't listen to it. And he ended up getting his PhD and master's at Cornell, his master's at MIT, became incredibly successful in engineering, and went on to be the assistant secretary of the Department of Energy. And I watched that from a very young age and heard that story. And I thought to myself, there's always going to be people telling you can't do something. And it feels awful when it happens. And it still does. It still stings 20 years later, after that 24-year-old self had been told that. It still stings. But that mindset shift can happen very quickly. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So yes, it was harder at 24 than it is now at 44, but it is something that was just a very young age I thought about. And I think all of us now as parents, the takeaway here is, how can we give that to our kids? How can we share with them the idea of adversity and resiliency and how that can be such a good thing? Jody, hi, good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. Thanks for chiming in.
Yeah,
Ask,
happy Wednesday.
by the way, if the audience is listening and they have questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, what you just remind me of is the power of sharing these experiences. So obviously it was your father, someone you respect and have a very close connection with, but by your father sharing that story with you seems to have helped you when you underwent a similar episode, right? Which
Yeah. And
reinforces.
I now do that with my son. So he didn't win a basketball game. And instead of being like, it stinks. You should have won. Like all of these things that we tell our kids, it's sometimes losing is the best thing that can happen to you, because you learn how to get better so that you win. And I tell him about how I didn't make 5 different teams in middle school. So I went to all of these different camps to get better at it. And then I made the team. Those are the stories we have to share with our kids so that they understand you aren't always going to win. You shouldn't always get a trophy. We can go
Yeah.
deep into the participation trophy, but
One one of my
it's important.
one of my favorite things is, I have two daughters, 15 and 13. The older one plays tennis and she's doing pretty well. And I kind of like laughing at myself at this stage of life, but she's like, "Dad, how are you at tennis?" I said, "I sucked. Like I just got on JV and I couldn't make it past that. And soccer and tennis, like I never made varsity." And I said, "The way you girls are going, like you have a pretty good shot." And they start
Mhm.
laughing at me, and then I laugh with them. And I say, "Look, but it didn't stop me. Like I just knew that I wasn't going to be a tennis player, and that's okay. I just focused on what I could."
Yeah.
So going back to the point of sharing a story of the adversity that happened, but that you're still here and you're okay, I feel is so empowering to people. It's one of the biggest gifts I think we can give to kids and peers.
And not just okay, but even better. I think that the adversity we've faced and I would challenge anyone that's watching right now or listening, think about the hardest time in your career or in your life and how much better you are for it because of that adversity. It's what made us so much. When you go through my career and you list off what it is, because I went through the adversities I went through, is why the next logo came up. Because I would have easily never had that next logo if I would have listened to many of the people that either said, you can't do this, you won't do this, you suck at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I have heard all of those things.
Yeah. And going to another conversation we had, which was a bit of a surprise to me, which is, look, you got your stuff packed down
Mhm.
with appearance and being able to read a teleprompter, being able to say something in 5 seconds and get your attention, right? Which is really important. And for background, everyone, I've spoken to Lynn, and the first time I met her, I was like, "Oh my God, tell me some tidbits." And she's like, "Well, you have to get the attention really quickly, and so you need to shorten your story. You need to get present yourself better." And so she's a communications and media expert, right? But
Mhm.
one of the things that was interesting is when she told me about her public speaking kind of topic and some adversity you've had there. So tell me about public speaking. You're a media expert. Are you an expert at media, public speaking as well?
This is a story that I share in an ebook I wrote called Confidence Quotient. And I started with the story because everyone thinks I'm supposed to be good at public speaking, because obviously I'm a communicator. I'm good on camera, and I say that now after being told I wasn't for so many years.
Yeah.
But everyone expects me to be really good at it. And the fun fact about me is my greatest weakness was public speaking. It was the idea that the camera is my crutch. So when I look into the camera, I picture the face of who I'm talking to, and it's comfort to me. I pictured the viewer when I was an anchor and I would be looking into that big camera, and I would picture the person having their cup of coffee in the morning. But when I'm in a room of either 5 or 800 people, it doesn't matter, I'm looking at their faces. And if you feel the same way, a lot of people struggle with public speaking. If you feel the same way, this is actually proven. Like, people fear public speaking more than they fear death. And so I had, over the course of my career, always had a hard time with it. My voice would shake, my knees would shake. But when I left the news business and I started my business, as a consultant and, podcast host and things like that, I was giving a presentation called How to Shine on Paper, on Camera, and in the Room. That was the key irony. And I had a panic attack. And I'd never had one before, so I didn't know what was happening, but my voice started to shake. My mouth turned to cotton. I couldn't talk. And I had to stop in front of all of these C-suite executives and look out into the audience and say, I am so sorry. I'm failing at this. Let's go to Q&A. I pivoted because I couldn't get through my presentation. And they gave me grace. And by the end of it, I said to them, one of the takeaways I wanted you to have from today was your failures can be exciting because it can mean you're one step closer to your success. And that was so true of that failure. It was so embarrassing. It was horrible, but it has become the first chapter of my book. It has become a story that I share with every executive that I coach, which enables them to overcome their own fears, because I created the methodology that I now coach executives with based on how I overcame my biggest fear, which is public speaking. And so I created a methodology. I did hire a keynote coach, and now I can walk up on stage and I can do it. And that's the key, is that if I would have let my mind and the brain bully is that voice in our head that tells us how awful we are, or how, the imposter syndrome, like everyone's going to have you figured out. If I would have let that voice win, I would have never walked on a stage again. That's how bad it was. But because I said to myself, like, this failure will become a success. It will. Adversity will become your success. And that's the whole point of Underdog Untold, is that these stories of adversity point you to your successes. And that certainly has. So from a panic attack at a public speaking event to a keynote speaker is the reminder. And Jody Lamb said it here, that her adversities also drove her to do new, scary, and exciting things. And that's the key. Like, you have to go through that embarrassing hard time to know that you can do scary things. Even if you fail, you will be successful.
Look, and I think public speaking is challenging for everyone, even professional speakers who go around the world. I've met a bunch and talked to them. Everyone still gets nervous, and that's fine. There's ways to turn that anxiety and nervousness into fuel to be better. Even for the talk we're nervous about, let's say that's tomorrow, there's ways to prep. But one thing I'll tell you that you said is, how did you have the courage and insight to say I'm failing out loud? Because I've been in scenarios where I've been nervous before I really realized what I needed to do to reduce my anxiety, and I just went through it and it just sucked. Like, the talk sucked, and then I felt like crap afterwards. I was like, I'm never going to speak again, and then slowly came back. But I feel like the courage to say I'm failing, like almost like a public reset, that is, number one, brilliant, and number two, courageous. So tell me how, like, because I think that's almost like we all need that, like, time out.
Like, hey guys, let's call it the obvious.
Yeah,
This is really bad.
I think
So
it's a
here's
great
what it is,
out.
Naveen. Here's what it is. And I coach executives all the time to do this. Say it out loud. Say out loud what it is, either that you want people to feel, you want people to understand. Don't beat around the bush. It could be, I don't want you to walk away from this talk today and go about business as usual. I want you to listen to what I'm saying and make change. That was one of the things that I had a client put in a keynote that she was presenting, because you have to say out loud what it is you want an audience to receive. And if that's, I'm failing, then that's just as powerful. And you know what? People walked up to me after that. First, it was at a really fancy country club, and I had the waiter come up to me and he gave me a hug, and he said, I can't tell you how much I needed to see that. And that was powerful for me, because my failure helped somebody else see that it's okay to fail. It's what you do when you fail that matters. And then I had some of the women email me afterward and said, you were the inspiration you didn't intend to be. And
Wow.
that's such a reminder of when we are failing and we say it out loud. It doesn't have to be I'm failing. It can be, hey, I know I seem a little nervous. I am a little bit. This isn't something I'm used to. But here's what I really want you to take away from today. So you say it out loud and admit to it, but bring people back in to what you want them to really take away. And when you start to get nervous, and here's a few tips that I've learned and now share with people. When you start to get nervous when you're presenting, because this is very natural, I want you to think of yourself as teaching and helping. That's what the whole point of a presentation is. You're sharing your expertise and your wisdom in hopes that it will be helpful to somebody else. So pivot in your mind. You can call it out and say, I get it. This might seem like I'm a little nervous, and I am, but I really want you to take this away from today. And here's another tip. And thank you, Mike. Courage before confidence. Thank you. I appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
Dr. Trung, transforming our most significant challenges into triumphs. Yes, I love that all of you are on the same page as this. Okay, so here's another tip. Right before you go on, and whether it's a podcast or whether it's a presentation, and you have like those few minutes before somebody introduces you. So do you ever get that feeling, Naveen, where it's like the tightness in your chest and you start to feel your heart sort of pitter
All
patter
the
and like
time. All the
butterflies?
time.
Yes. So here's what I want you to do. And don't think I'm crazy, everyone. It actually really works. We have like some of the like leaders of billion-dollar companies now that I coach that do this trick, and it works. So right in between your thumb and your forefinger is a pressure point. Okay. So right here, that's a pressure point. And I want you to, right before when you start to feel that feeling, is push down really hard on that pressure point and sit in your lap. You've got your hands down on your lap so no one can tell that that's what you're doing. But it's something that is in your nervous system that just calms down. Can you feel it when you do that? And I encourage everyone who's listening right now or watching, just try that right there and push down as hard as you can. Naveen, do
Doing
you
it.
feel the difference? Do you feel the difference in your nervous system of
I
just
think so, but it
calming you
might be a little
down?
psychological, which is fine. Right? I mean, in the end, it's
It's
placebo effect sometimes too.
exactly.
It's like I'm
So
doing
wait, I
something that
forgot
has
I'm
shown.
talking to a doctor. So he's going to be
Yeah,
like,
but
medically, this is impossible.
well, we didn't learn this in medical school. So that number one, I'm always willing to learn a lot of things, but the placebo effect is real. If I tell you right now as a physician, this will make you feel better, there's a good chance that that impacts a lot of people. And so for me, whether that really relaxes me physiologically is not as important as if it works psychologically.
That's right.
So next time I'm nervous and pounding my heart and something's happening, which at least once a week something's happening where I'm really uncomfortable, I'll do that and I'll
Yeah.
let you know how it goes.
Will you? Please do.
I,
I know
I
you'll text
absolutely,
me.
I will. I mean, that's brilliant, and that's actually what I like to tell people too. In medical school, we learn about the body and physiology, so many things, but there's so many other things we don't learn about.
Yeah.
And it's really going to school is learning how to learn with a good foundation to proactively and reactively treat people. But there's so many great people who know so many things, and who would have thought an anchor, a CNN anchor for 15 years, an NBC anchor, all this kind of stuff is teaching me how to relax. That's the brilliance of it, right?
And you know what's funny is it's so much of mindsets, just like you said, physiologically versus psychologically. So much of our success is our mindset. That's the whole thing about the underdog mindset. You know, I mean, you can have the underdog mindset, and that's what makes you the winner. That's what makes
Yeah.
you successful, is because if you have the proper mindset, if you have the professional athlete mindset, right? Like, you athletes have a routine that they do every single game. They have mindset work that they do before every single game. They visualize their successes. It's powerful. I didn't learn that until well after I had some of my successes. I didn't do this stuff until I actually left my anchor job. I learned
But
this in the last 2.5, 3 years.
But wasn't there, so mindset, of course, I work on it every single morning. I read,
Mhm.
I do yoga, I reflect, I have a gratitude practice. I do a lot in the morning that I invest in myself.
Yeah.
That being said, you can have a strong mindset, strong outlook, strong perspective, but then physically get ill and have to do something. And don't you have a story about being physically ill and having to do something?
Oh my gosh. So Naveen asked me, he was like, I mean, being an anchor for that long, like, how did you, every single day you have to be on? Like, you can't have a bad day. Like, no one at home knows that you've had a bad day. And I went to my nephew's christening, and everybody at the christening got food poisoning. And I was an overnight anchor, and I flew in that morning, and I had to be at work at 10 o'clock at night and work until 8 o'clock in the morning with food poisoning. And it was probably the hardest thing I ever did. You would have never known it if you watched it. Never known if you watched that show, the incredible, like, pain I was going through. And the way that I did it was a mindset shift. Like, I took windows of time mentally that I had to be on. I had to, and 10-minute blocks before you had a commercial break. And I would look into the camera, and it was like 10 minutes. All you have to do is 10 minutes. And it's sometimes in life, especially when people have gone through tremendous grief or tremendous loss or tremendous failure, sometimes it's like you just have to get through the next 10 minutes, 1 minute, 60 seconds, whatever it is, 5 seconds. Like, you just have to get through that small window of time. And it's 3 words that Naveen and I share the passion for, these 3 words. It is just keep going. Just keep going, because no matter what you face in your life, if you just keep going, you will succeed. You will. It's the There's too many proof points. There's too many success stories to prove me wrong. And if you can give me an example of one, then you win. But I'm telling you, those 3 words will transform your life.
And my 3 words are keep moving forward, which is a very similar message to
Yeah.
yourself and to others, which is even if, I go back to my childhood of soccer practice when my coach was like, keep running. And everyone's about like nauseous and need water, said, keep going. And we were okay. You
Mhm.
actually get some strength up here after you're done. You're like, I didn't quit. It actually felt okay. Now I was exhausted. I
Mhm.
almost wanted to throw up. Maybe I did throw up. I don't remember. But in the end, I was okay and I was probably stronger. And you apply
Mhm.
that to everything, right? And actually, when you were talking about food poisoning and having to be your best, that's not too different from a lot of other professions. And, being a physician and knowing a lot of colleagues who were very, very ill, let's say food poisoning, something that wasn't contagious, but still had to show up and take care of people,
Yes.
right? I think the one difference was a lot of folks could focus on their patients. They could focus on something else or someone else, do their
Mhm.
job, and things went smooth because they weren't focusing on it. They weren't overthinking, oh my gosh, I feel like crap. I'm so ill.
Yes.
They were like, I'm helping someone. And unfortunately, a lot of physicians have to work really, really hard through the night, through the day, in circumstances where there's no one else to fill in, and they have to do that. And there's plenty of stories in the physician world, and I would just say the healthcare worker world, where people show up.
Mhm.
But I think also the moral of the story is when you focus on taking care of others or bringing value to others, you can feel better even when you're physically ill.
It's so
And
funny that you
so,
say that, Naveen, because I
yeah,
just had this conversation this morning with a client before I came on. And I said, "How do you want going on a panel?" And so we were having a little session before the panel. "How do you want people to feel after listening to you?" And he said, "I want them to feel like I've helped them." And that's, when you get down to just good humans, they want to use their expertise in order to help people, whether they're a physician or whether they're, a CEO. They want to be able to help people. And so that mindset of whether you're going into an interview or a presentation, how can I help people? How can I teach? It goes back to that teaching. Like, what is it that I can do today to try and help? And that's our purpose, right? That goes to our purpose and what it is that we do our jobs for. Some people do it for profit, but
yeah.
a lot of people that are fulfilled do it for purpose.
Yeah, and I will also add to that. I feel like I needed to be at a certain level to start helping others. But if you start now, even if you're having your own adversity or feel like you don't have the energy to help others,
Mhm.
it's just like keep moving forward. It's actually by doing that, it does fill your cup. And
Yeah.
so it's an interesting perspective that would want to tell my younger self, and I tell my kids that is actually start today. Help someone else. You're having a rough day, go help someone. It will make your day smoother. It will make their day smoother, and you will just feel better at the end of the day. And if you can just scale that for all of us today to do that for someone, things get better. We will visually see things get
Yeah.
better, and we will feel better.
So
We
very
just have
true.
a few minutes left, but I would love to ask you, what is your ultimate underdog role? You've obviously been in, an anchor, and we've heard a lot of that adversity. I'm sure you have a lot of things that you've been through. What's your ultimate underdog role?
When I left being an anchor and I became an entrepreneur, which is how I met Naveen. One of the beautiful things about becoming an entrepreneur is the people that you meet. The entrepreneurs are notoriously the most giving, amazing people because they know how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. And so they see somebody else coming into the pack and they welcome them with open arms and say, "How can I help you?" And I was the ultimate underdog. I had been a W 2 for 20 years. I had never had a LLC or a invoice to send or a Excel worksheet to work on. I mean, think about this as a news anchor. We don't do PowerPoint presentations. We
Yeah,
don't work in Excel. I had a lot to learn in a very short amount of time. And I could have been really intimidated by that. And if any of you that are listening have ever done something totally new and uncomfortable, you know the feeling. But I will say, I've never experienced greater joy than that underdog experience because it was such a challenge and it was such an uncomfortable feeling that the success felt so much greater. The wins felt so much greater than the losses. And there were lots of losses in the last 2.5 years that I've been doing this, almost 3 years that I've been an entrepreneur. So many losses. But the wins, when the wins come, oh man, it's better than any show I've ever anchored. It's really
that's
incredible because of how much you have to overcome.
that's awesome, and obviously I can relate to that in the entrepreneurial world. Being a physician, and there's difficulties in every pathway, but one thing in the physician realm is there is a known steps. And so it's like if you work your tail off, you will get to the next step, and then you will get to the next step. With entrepreneurship, it's chaos. It's chaotic out there. There's no books that say, okay, do this, and do this, especially in your industry, in your company, whatever you're doing. But the fulfillment can be so great because when something does come together, because you created it, it's like no other. But that being said, we're at the end of the show here. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Lynn, for being here. We obviously talk, on our own, and I'm glad we have this friendship. But to be able to share some of the things you talked about today is amazing. And obviously, Lynn helps a lot of people. There's a QR code to scan and learn about her. She does a lot of stuff on multiple social channels. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your gems, because even today I learned a lot of things, including, when I get anxious in the future.
Naveen, it's such a pleasure. I am so grateful for our friendship, and I learned so much from you. And like I said, you welcomed me into this entrepreneur world with open arms. You've shared and taught me so much, and you do to your audience as well. That's why I'm so glad to see you be, launching Untold, because it's something that a lot of us need a reminder of, that your underdog story is actually the one that you need to be telling. So thanks for doing this,
Absolutely.
Naveen.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for chiming in and visiting the show. Look forward to having everyone next time. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show and want to continue to learn more, follow me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Help us tell these underdog untold stories by sharing it with people who could learn and be inspired from it. Remember, underdogs don't stop.